Hello everyone. Today we're gonna talk and discuss famine 1931 to 33. Famine in Kazakhstan. The famine in Kazakhstan between 1932 and 1933 was one of the deadliest in the history of the region. It was caused by a combination of factors, including colonization policies, crop failures, and drought. The Soviet government's policy of colonization, which aimed to replace small private farmers with large collective ones, led to the seizure of grain and livestock from peasant farmers. This in turn caused a decline in agriculture production, leading to widespread food shortages. As a result of the famine, it is estimated that up to 1.5 million people died in Kazakhstan, which was about a quarter of the population at the time.
So, what is the consequence of this famine? The famine affected the Kazakh population severely, with estimated of deaths ranging from 1.5 to 2.3 million people. The famine's consequences were widespread and included social, economical, and political ramifications. The famine led to a breakdown of social structures, with families being torn apart as members migrated in search of food or were forced to work in other parts of the country. This led to a rise in crime and other social ills. The economic impact of the famine was severe, with the loss of human capital and a decline in productivity. The government's attempts to manage the famine exacerbated the situation, with grain requisition and the forced relocation of population leading to further desolation and loss of life. The political impact of the famine was significant, with the Soviet governments handling the situation being heavily criticized. The government's propaganda and censorship efforts tried to conceal the extent of the crisis, leading to a loss of trust and legitimacy. The famine also contributed to a sense of resentment and distrust between different ethnic groups, as the Kazakh population left neglected and discriminated against. So what's the practical use of this video? So the Kazakh famine was a devastating event that had a long-lasting consequence for the Kazakh people and the Soviet Union as a whole. It highlighted the dangers of misguided agricultural policies and the devastating effects of famine. The information are taken from the book called The Famine of 1932 in the Black Book of Communism, Crimes, Terror, Repression, page between 131 and 144, from Harvard University Press.
Who is responsible for these actions? Who is to blame for the massive famine and as a consequence of the disease and the epidemic? Why were slogans about a great bright future sounded in Moscow at a time when millions of compatriots were dying of hunger? There are no answers, and there couldn't have been, since the mention or discussion of the famine in the Soviet Union was taboo until the beginning of the glasnost policy. And by the time this information began to reach the public, there were no more participants or witnesses to these events. Kazakhs often call this famine Goloshokinsky, after the main responsible person in Kazakhstan in those years. He is definitely a performer, but not only him. As we can see from the documents, the entire communist system of power perfectly understood the scale of the disaster and was clearly aware of this. Stalin, while in Moscow, knew about all the details of the famine in Kazakhstan and personally wrote about the need for tough actions in relation to the population. In addition, do not forget about the contribution of local communists, even small herds of collective farms having only a small influence on the scale of the whole system, and those, due to personal greed and the thirst for profit, become participants in this extermination of starving. Therefore, undoubtedly, the entire Soviet system was rotten in its essence, not counting the individuals who was the exception, but few of them even lived to see the war. For Goloshokin, they say Politburo is responsible. Famine in Kazakhstan, Kuban, and Ukraine is called Holodomor. Is it really so important, and what is the main difference between these two concepts? Only one thing. Hunger is a natural phenomenon that happened as a result of circumstances beyond the control of a person, and the Holodomor is an artificial creation of conditions for the famine of the population with the aim of destroying it or imposing its own ideology on it. The communist government used any methods to sabotage the population. Someone was evicted, someone was killed, and someone was forced to starve it. It is worth adding that most of her nationality didn't matter much for her. You are either a communist, which means one of us, or you are not and are subject to Sovietization. Summing up, we can say that the entire Soviet government was to some extent reasonable for this horrific famine, which according to our historians took at least 3 million Kazakhs from their life.
If I say about our explanation, our goal is to identify the main causal causes of famine in Kazakhstan in 1931-33, to find out about its consequence and scale, whether this famine was natural or man-made, and who was behind all these terrible consequences of famine in Kazakhstan.